Keep watching The Politics every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely convince you.
Okay, good morning again, everyone. Thanks for joining us this Thursday on the Foreign Policy Review. We're getting off to a little late start. CARLO wanted me to make sure he is blamed for our late start, but we don't really care. We don't really care. We got a lot to talk about. We got an hour to discuss current events. We would like to start with some news coming out of Africa about a possible intervention into Niger by some countries that the West is either bribing or threatening to join this intervention. So Ben, can you want to share what you've learned recently about the intervention being on again?
I wanted to enjoy you blaming CARLO a little bit more, but fine, absolutely. I have to practice because we have access to the same cheat sheet of news that our viewers don't. So I want to give you a little bit of just a couple of weeks of history. So the new government, or you can call it a junta, they took power and they ousted Bazoum, who was a very important Western guy, it turns out, because ECOWAS was all ready to go, the intervention machine. ECOWAS is the west of the Sahel economic community, practically led by the nose by France. But basically they were ready to go, let's go intervene, get them out and all of that. And then it grind to a halt, and Russia warned, apparently, that no, you should have a peaceful solution. Putin was on a telephone call with, I think, I don't want to be quoted on this, either the Chad or the Burkina Faso government. Anyway, then the African Union, which has quite some weight and usually reflexively does the same as the West wants and what ECOWAS wants, said no. We say no to a military invention. And the government, the junta, said that this Bazoum guy, if anybody intervenes militarily, we're going to kill him. He's going to be gone. And that got me thinking. I read a fantastic thread about this. Why is he so important, like more important than raw resources? So I thought, okay, the military intervention is dead, basically. We are at a standstill. Everybody's making a move. And then just today, we got it from, African News, Reuters, always covering it, that there's an abbreviation called CCDC of the ECOWAS, which is the Committee of Chiefs of Defense Staff. So basically, the defense ministers are meeting today and tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, in Ghana. And the quote is, the title, they always use it in air quotes, but it is to activate an intervention force in Niger. So I don't know better than any of you guys, but I mean, which one do we listen to? Is it the caution or gung-ho, let's go? There's both sides represented here. And the third side, obviously, is France getting pissed, but I think we can address that later.
Doesn't this have echoes of Ukraine? Another proxy army willing to sacrifice itself? Burkina Faso, Mali, and to a certain extent Algeria have already made it very clear that they will come to Niger's defense if they're attacked. That means all hell is going to break loose in the Sahel. I can understand why Tinubu is so eager, or at least was so eager, to spearhead an intervention, because the U.S. IRS has so much on him for laundering drug money when he was a student in Chicago.
The bag man.
And that's the kind of thing that they CC the FBI, they CC the DOJ, they CC the CIA, and they put this guy in the file somebody they can manipulate down the road. And then, of course, he's had this successful career as a politician. And I'm sure if you look more closely at it, you would see that the U.S. was instrumental in that. I can see that. I have no notion of, like what Ben was talking about, the importance of the equal importance
Bazoum.
of Bazoum. I don't get it. I would think you have to look past Bazoum to the resource value and the positional value of Niger in the the checkerboard that's running across Sahel. The Sahel. I mean, it's that one more. When Chad falls, that's the end of the obstruction to China's developmental process of development in that region.
That's
beyond
that's
that.
why,
I can't come up with anything.
That's why we titled this episode The Flashpoint, because China's there, Russia's there, old Europe is there, and the US is there. And that's where they're playing out the grand chess game. Now, like you, Bola Tinubu, I didn't know anything about until George Galloway got into a high-profile spat with him and his lackeys. And yeah, you can call him a bagman, basically a drug dealer, very much bought and paid for. But then I started following some remarkable African Twitter users and threads about this this Bazoum guy, and it looks like he's the linchpin to future, current, and very old agreements. Like him personally, he looks very important. But another aspect to this, we talked about last time, is that France is very pissed. That was in Le Figaro magazine, like an unnamed French diplomat said that this is not what we expect from the US, that they did the opposite of what an ally should do with allies like these, etc., etc. And everywhere I saw US headlines, they refused to call it a coup. And now, just yesterday, the US has appointed an ambassador, this Kathleen Fitzgibbons woman, I don't know her background, I didn't have time, to Niger, while this provisional junta, the new government, whatever, is in charge. That's basically rubber stamping it as a legitimate regime.
I had 2 points I wanted to make, but now you've given me a third, Ben. So now I have 3 points. Okay.
All right. Well, give me just one more second to give one more tidbit onto this, because the US is very peculiar to me in this aspect. Because right now, the CNN had this headline and a segment on telly saying the Biden administration is looking for ways to keep the US forces in Niger to continue anti-terror operations. And you might have seen there's some statistics that go there. 2001, that was the beginning of the war on terror. That was like between 2002 and 3, there were 9 terrorist attacks in the whole continent of Africa. And just in the Sahel, in 2022, there were 2,700 of them. So it looks like wherever they go to fight terrorism blooms. That's what I wanted to add. But what are your 3 points that got raised?
So the way CARLO described Tinubu as if, the West had something on him and so they were leveraging him, I kind of think it might be a little bit different. I kind of think that he's proven his bona fides by helping them launder their illicit, money and working for them in that capacity. And then they decided, let's promote him. He's good doing this for us. Let's do, so this distinction between, criminality and the government, it's all connected. So it's not like he was a criminal drug smuggler that they had stuff on and then they leveraged him. Okay, you better do what we want. It was like, no, you served us there, and now maybe you can serve us in this capacity. And we know we can trust you because you did all this crazy stuff for us. So it's like a slightly different perspective of him. So the other guy, I didn't hear.
Like the von der Leyen, but of Africa, not of Europe. Yeah.
Or the DEA situation in Afghanistan. I'll get back to that when Billy Bob's done. Go ahead, Billy Bob.
Well, the second thing was about, you mentioned that CARLO kind of stole my thunder on this second point, was that I don't think it had much to do with them threatening the life of the deposed leader in Niger. And what was his name again?
Bazoum.
Bazoum. So I think the reason, do we know why it wasn't called? Because this is my third point. you guys know why the U.S. hasn't labeled it a coup, right? I mean, I think you guys probably told me. I probably learned it from you, so I don't want to pretend like I. So the thing is, if the U.S. would have declared a coup, they would have had to end all military relations with the country. They would have had to move their air base out. Like it's the Western law. So that's why they're being very careful not to call it a coup officially, because then by law they would have to move their drone base out, and they would have to sever all military relations with Niger. I thought I learned that from you guys. So
that's new to me.
That's actually right.
That's the legal nicety of it. Yes.
Right.
Right. But do they abide the rule of law?
No, and that's the thing. So they have a choice.
Context, we mentioned this, but the largest U.S. drone base is in Niger, like billions worth. Yeah.
And it's easier to just not call it a coup than it is to explain away to all the nosy reporters why they're violating their own laws. But they're not against violating their own laws and explaining it to the nosy reporters and telling the nosy reporters, hey, stop talking about this. And they will. But, you know, they've just chose the path of least resistance right now is to just not call it a coup.
Yeah.
Well, I think I might have had one other point, but I can't remember. Okay, Carlo.
Yeah, let's take a little dance down memory lane to Afghanistan, and take a chapter from the second edition of Alfred McCoy's Politics of Heroin, where he talks about the DEA in Afghanistan. He points out that that at one point there were 14 DEA agents in Afghanistan, but when the CIA, at the request of the CIA, who also wanted 500 military trucks, and were denied the military trucks by the Department of Defense, but eventually got them. They were overruled. They wanted the DEA reduced, and so 12 of those agents were called back, and only 2 were there. And that's when the heroin production went through the roof. Okay? This pertains to what Billy Bob is saying, because very often institutions like the DEA, or in this case, in Tinubu's case, the IRS, doesn't know what the CIA is doing. So it really kind of bolsters Billy Bob's argument. And I think that's an historical, a relative historical context that we could maybe bring into play here.
And I've got one more point, but I don't want to interrupt Ben.
I'd like to respond to that, because that's excellent, because in the last couple of weeks, Ukraine has legalized pornography, which the Soviet constitution did not allow. And there's obviously some sex comforting going on with people who have lost limbs. And they've also trying in the Verkhovna Rada, trying to legalize, hash, basically drugs, all kinds of drugs. Very interesting when you consider that Afghanistan became basically a poppy plantation under 20 years of the war on terror, you know, and the war on drugs basically intersecting. They become a drug haven. You don't have to like them or anything, but the Taliban government basically eradicated that in half a year, and they're growing wheat, barley, some olives here and there. Yeah. So they just upended it in half a year.
The second time they've done that.
That was the point I was wanting to make. I think a big reason that we went into Afghanistan was because the Taliban had basically eradicated the opium production, right? So this was the Afghan invasion. What was it? When was that? It was like after the Trade Center, after the trade towers.
2002 or 3,
yeah. And so that was the pretext. You know, the towers were the pretext, but I think one of the main reasons, actual reasons, was because the Taliban had brought opium production to a standstill, or heroin production, and we couldn't, the CIA lost that revenue stream. They couldn't fund their black ops, and it was bad. I mean, drugs, heroin, a large part of the global economy. It's like 1, 2, maybe up to 5% of global commerce. That might be an exaggeration, but a big part of the global economy is drugs, and so when that gets affected, that has financial ramifications. But the other thing is, we don't have a heroin problem anymore. We've moved off of heroin because we couldn't control the heroin. So now it is, what is it? It's
fentanyl.
Fentanyl. It's synthetic. So it's not dependent upon Afghanistan anymore. Isn't that funny how that works out? So when we can't build the heroin fields and control them and own them, then, well, we need to move off to a different substance now. So now it's fentanyl. And of course, China's to blame, even though it's all being, manufactured by our narco terrorists in the South and, brought into this country by, the black ops, the government agencies that profit off of it. But and Alfred McCoy again is a authority, an expert on that entire topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Chinese Foreign Ministry has lectured the U.S. numerous times on this, saying we produce like mass amounts of midstream chemicals that you can use for fertilizers, for deodorants and all that. It's not our responsibility to channel what that goes into if it's turned into fentanyl on your bloody land. Yeah.
It's just a lie. It's an anti-China hoax. It's propaganda. I mean, just like everything else, just like the genocide, the fentanyl, the organ harvesting. I mean, you go down the list. It's nonsense.
It was funny when you put it that 9/11, where a bunch of Saudis hijacked some planes and smashed them into buildings. Now we have to turn Afghanistan into a poppy field. Yeah, I get the logic. Nice U.S. foreign policy.
And I'm curious. I mean, I know, Ben, that you, along with a lot of people around the world, are intrigued. I mean, not intrigued, but I guess horrified by scenes like the Kensington neighborhood in Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah. There's a new one every week on YouTube of these.
It's a staggering. I mean, in a country where, that was impoverished, that didn't have the GDP that the United States has, or the simple wealth. That might be expected because people are in such dire straits, but the sheer pressure of capitalism. But one of the things I've noticed is there's especially on your cheat sheet this week was the hysteria among the elites toward the situation in Ukraine and also by extension the situation in the Sahel. This notion that Russia has to lose, that the West has to win, when clearly Russia is winning. I mean, they're on the outskirts of Kupiansk. I mean, they're gaining, like you pointed out in the show on Tuesday, they've gained more ground than the Ukrainian counteroffensive has gained.
There's much more to be said about Russia, but you're right about the hysterics. They seem to have lost their minds on this hill.
Yes, and what does that bode for a foreign policy?
I think when it comes to people like the very serious diplomatic core that Russia has, with Lavrov, Zakharova, the very serious diplomatic core that China has with Wang Yi, and even India saying, okay, Joe Biden says all kinds of shit, but if he's not in charge, who's in charge? These people like Blinken, like Nuland, who said even more rabid, all kinds of shit. We just can't trust or deal with this government. That's what's brewing here, because I mean, we've got used to Kiev saying things like, it needs to be destroyed like modern day Carthage. That's Russia. But, like the NATO puppets, the EU puppets, all of them. But here's how we can connect it to the Sahel, which was very interesting to me. Major news was previous President Nicolas Sarkozy, who would be pronounced Sarkozy because his dad was Hungarian. That's where that name comes from. Just a bit of history. This was 12 years ago, people, a dozen years, not too long ago. He was not so keen on destroying Libya, but then British intelligence gave him some intelligence saying, oh, they want to introduce a gold-backed currency. And then he was all aboard, one of the rabid dogs who wanted to destroy Libya with the NATO invasion. And he did. By the way, Libya was owned 50 million euros by France, which was erased. And then $7 billion of gold was removed from Libya. We don't know where it went. Anyway, right now, he's come out in an interview as the voice of reason in Europe against the US, saying we don't have the same geopolitical goals as the US, and Ukraine has no place in the EU. It has to remain neutral between Russia and the EU, and Crimea has always been Russia. Those were the comments coming from this guy, who 10 years ago was one of these rabid guys going perfectly along with US foreign policy. Retired, so he doesn't have that much responsibility, came out again as the kind of voice of reason on a continent that seems to have gone mad, except for some German outlets that we'll talk about. But that Sarkozy interview was, I thought, very interesting. What do you guys think?
I agree. What's that saying? Like, it takes time to turn the Titanic around or something. Like, there's some kind of saying like that, and there's so many considerations, and you don't have one person who can change the policy just by saying so. So it's an empire, and it doesn't. It's there's power is relatively diffused among the ruling capitalist class establishment, but there's domestic policy concerns, so the Democrats, for instance, they can't say, hey, we lost. I mean, the Republicans,
they'll never say that. I think we all know they will never say that.
So it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to change course and to modify the strategy. And so even while they're in the midst of doing that, you're still going to have voices that aren't with the program parroting, the talking points of a week ago. And so, this process is going to play out over many months where, they're resigning themselves to the reality that their initial plan didn't work out. And now we're going to do this. And all that just takes time. And it's an ugly process. And it's, we observe it and we watch it play out here. We comment on it. But this is definitely a sign, when people like Sarkozy are allowed to say these things and put it out for public dissemination. It's definitely one of those signs that things aren't going how they had hoped, and they're going back to the drawing board, so to speak. But what Plan B is remains to be seen.
There was another one. I think an interesting little just for a day. There was an interesting flag going up, and it went down as fast as it went up, which was the what do you call it? The chief of staff of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg's chief of staff. So he's the general secretary, and underneath him, the chief of staff on his own accord. Apparently, he said, "Well, yes, Ukraine can get into NATO, basically the German solution, by giving up part of its territory." Now, to remind people, when Germany got into NATO, it was just West Germany, but they said, yes, we represent all of Germany, and the plan was, we'll get that back later from the Soviets. So you can imagine what Russia would respond to that. Just let Kiev in, so they got this stuff back later, and we have to fight this war all over again. And it got negative reactions from Ukraine as well, saying, well, we're not going to go for that. And the next day, this guy retracted what he said, saying it was a mistake, it was in different context, I shouldn't have said that. And it went away. Now, I don't believe it came from that guy, because Stoltenberg serves Washington. So it came from somewhere high up. Let's put up a flag. Let's test the waters. And, okay, so that's not a good off-ramp. What the hell else do we do now that the last reserves of Ukraine, the last NATO-trained, big, shiny Challenger tanks and Marders and all that are actually heading to Rabotino, which seems it's all in the Zaporozhye direction, and it seems to be that's the final showdown, and we are heading into that rapidly. What else? What's Plan B? What's Plan C? I have no idea.
Is the Sahel part of Plan B? I mean, is there? I'm very suspicious of the position that the United States has taken toward France in this whole situation in the
French are too
in the region. Yeah, I know, like you pointed out, and I can't quite put my finger on it. I watched Glenn Greenwald do his piece on Victoria Nuland, which I thought was very informative. There were several things there I actually didn't know, and it seemed like
on her visit to Niger.
No, it was on her entire history as a foreign policymaker, and it was like a will to power. It was like a Nietzsche, Nietzsche light. The United States can will this situation to occur, and by sheer force of will, and it was, and she seemed to project that over and over and over again without any kind of thing to back it up, which you can get from if you listen to Scott Ritter or Doug McGregor, though. McGregor's such a racist. Oh my God! If Trump is elected,
Larry Johnson,
if he makes Doug McGregor like, head of a homestead security or whatever it's called, we're in for
Homeland.
We're in for it. Billy Bob and I will be broadcasting from a FEMA camp somewhere in the Colorado, but But anyway, it's just that it seems curious to me that the United States is taking this position in the Sahel, yet at the same time encouraging behind the scenes this second proxy war after they've already cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. They're going to try it again, and they're going to fail again. And it's like that's the definition of insanity. It's just it's a kind of a folklorish cliche, but my God, I mean, it's obviously if ECOWAS goes in with its force, none of those people want to go there. There's no backing for this in Senegal nor Nigeria.
Even
they
Nigeria,
don't want to do it, and I got to tell you that you train people at the former School of the Americas. Those guys, they're not trained for combat. They're trained for torture tactics and police tactics, that sort of thing. So I don't know what they think is going to happen, because people in Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger and Algeria, they have impetus to get rid of these fuckers. They can see the writing on the wall. I mean, you can just listen to what they're saying themselves. My wife and I watched African Stream this morning, and those young guys, man, they know it. They know American history. They know American and French foreign policy better than 99% of Americans know it. So
pretty low bar, Carlo. That's a very low bar.
Yeah, to all my American friends out there, learn something. Learn that these people know what you're all about.
So Flashpoint is a great word for what's going on in Africa. I think ultimately the U.S. is seeking to pivot from the Ukraine debacle and start a new debacle with China, based on Taiwan and also in Africa. But was there some recent news, Ben? I'm going to throw it to you. Was there some recent news about China? They were saying something like they're going to take a very forceful stand against the latest U.S. provocation in Taiwan. Are you familiar with that?
Well, Xi Jinping instructed the PLA to prepare basically for an armed conflict with the collective West, which means all of the West. I don't know if MUTIU is about. He could maybe message us if he wants us to go for a break. Otherwise, I could go on. But recent news from China is the World Robotics Championship, or Gala something, took place there. I'm just going to quickly go there, which was just, I think, amazing.
Well, we're at 28 and a half minutes. Usually we do it half an hour at 30 minutes, but for the break. But whatever, we can go to a break now or in a couple of minutes. But if you wanted to.
So the World Robotics Conference took place there. Zero coverage in the West. Exactly the same as, the Army 2023 Expo in Moscow, and then the security conference in Moscow, just hundreds of delegations from all over the place. And apparently, because the world is undergoing a global, basically slowdown risk, the Russian engine has to slow down. So there's talk of deflation. And what the financial news came out with, the Chinese have the prices of household goods has gone down for the first time in 2 years as risk of deflation increases. Everything is bad news, even when the Chinese get food cheaper. Exactly the same as Russia, by the way. Everything is framed as China is going down now, 24 hours, 4 weeks, 3 years. I don't know where Gordon Chang is currently, but I hadn't picked up on much regarding anything around Taiwan, but I do know the US is in huge trouble with the TSMC plant, which they plan to build in Arizona, and that's just one debacle after the debacle, costing billions and billions and billions of dollars.
Should we talk about that that agenda, that particular strategy of the West to lock China out of the chips market? We'll do that after break, actually. So we're going to take our 30-minute break. We'll be right back in a sec.
Undoubtedly, Africa is the best tourism destination on Earth. The continent is blessed with the most conducive atmosphere. To feel and enjoy these blessings, join the most productive one-week tour of the continent organized by Daylight Africa every September 2nd to September 9th to see beyond the fallacies about Africa on the mainstream media. Contact us at daylightafrica@gmail.com or call 718-822-5555. Daylight Africa. Revolutionizing tourism industries in Africa.
Right.
All right, we are back. So we were just about to discuss the U.S. attempt, the controversial attempt to, lock China out of high-tech chips and make sure that they don't develop a capacity to create their own high-tech chips and to make sure they can't import them from the West. This is a big U.S. strategy to, subvert China, defeat China, bring it to its knees, contain China is what they say. But it's really about, regime change, balkanization, what the U.S. always wants to keep their adversaries, their rivals.
I'm not sure what's going on with your microphone. Now you're perfectly clear, but sometimes you get very,
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta speak into the microphone.
That's good.
That's much better.
Yeah, so I mean, you wanna contextualize this U.S. effort to, keep China from the capability to manufacture the high-tech chips and to import high-tech chips from the West.
Yeah, I wish I could do the full history because it began with Huawei because they made cheaper and better phones and 5G technology was on the brink of creating it with the use of Western chips. So Joe Biden said, let's smash those supply chains and attract everything to the US. And part of that was TSMC, the largest fab, the largest microchip semiconductor manufacturer in the world, which is a Chinese firm. So they got these tax incentives, millions or billions of that the US will pay if they make stuff here, made in the USA. So they said, set up a fab, which is the manufacturing plant, very high tech, very clean, like a sci-fi kind of plant where they create microchips, like CPUs, processors, that sort of high-end stuff. In Arizona, which is great because it has to remain clean, it's arid, it's perfect. But what they had, like week one, they had huge issues with US labor. And it wasn't just skilled labor, which took months and months to find, but the attitude towards labor, which what Asia's like. It's to be a technician at TSMC is the honor of a lifetime. You will sacrifice 20 hours of your day just to be there. And Taiwan said, this is not moving. We are losing money through the nose. So we're going to import 500 Taiwanese workers who know what they're doing. They've built plants before. And suddenly there was a sprawl between some kind of pipe union, I don't recite perfectly, who did this massive petition to not give them visas, not give these 500 Taiwanese workers visas. They are currently in this spat, and Joe Biden is in the middle of it with nothing getting built. And by the way, there's also been numerous headlines. It's the unsafest construction site in the world. There have been numerous accidents and falling and all that. It's just not looking good. And it was worth billions. And now, last week, they announced, well, we're actually also going to invest in a fab in Germany. I don't know what Taiwan is thinking to invest in Germany right now, which we can talk about. The latest, they just warned that there's going to be a gas price hike. The economic ministry just warned Germans there's going to be a gas price hike now that we're going into heating season. So energy is a big question mark in Germany. Why would you set up there? But the whole thing around the TSMC plan, it went to shit. Also, China can't manufacture high-end chips, and within this year, they went all the way down, not to 14 millimeter, 28 nanometer, legacy chips you can call them. But this week, all of the, let's call it Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times of London, they were always use the word panic and unease at China is flooding the world with legacy chips, and it might change the industry. So apparently they've mastered the technology that they manufactured so much, they've flooded everything, the price is going down, that the high-end stuff that they need these European lithography machines to create is suffering. Samsung has posted huge negatives on profit. So has Intel, which tried to acquire another Chinese company, which was it fell through. The Chinese...
they were all profiting off the Chinese market. And then when the West said you can't export your chips to China anymore, they took a huge loss. And so all, the chip makers are taking a loss. And then also the legacy chips, like you said, the less advanced, China is able to export them, and so they're losing their revenue there as well. But it's a silly policy to try and think that this technology, that you can keep China from understanding how to utilize it and improve upon it.
It's what Carlo said. These people, they will it so, and so it shall be. That is how they think. I mean, China, they can't innovate, can they? They can't do this stuff. And Huawei, who was banned from the technology of 5G chips in their phones, just came out with their own 5G chips and their own OS. It's released. They're making billions now, recalibrated towards the. They
created their own operating system because the West wouldn't let them utilize in the Huawei phones the Western operating system. So they created their own, and it's
the two little restrictions on rare earth exports, which was gallium and germanium, it caused an absolute panic in the financial people in Europe and in the United States. I mean, they absolutely know what they're doing. Come on, these guys are going to the moon with the Russians. They have their own space station. What the fuck were you thinking?
And TSMC, they were warned that if Taiwan ever reconciles with China, that the U.S. would physically destroy TSMC. They would blow up the plant before they allowed China to have any kind of influence over it.
Scorched earth. Mark Sleboda made a big story out of this, and obviously the tweet from Garland Nixon that went viral around the world was part of it. They called it scorched earth in the Pentagon policy paper. If I can't have it, neither can you. Was the strategy.
We could talk about the Soviet Union nuclear weapons. I mean, how long did it take for the Soviet Union to come up with its own atomic bomb?
Tell me now.
And all I hear about is Chinese espionage.
Tell me now. You watched Oppenheimer.
Factor that in, but you could make it even humorous. I mean, Thomas Edison made his whole career on stealing other people's devices.
Yes.
He was no Nikola Tesla by a long stretch.
That is the good comparison.
So, I mean, it's just absurd to think these technologies, that you have a proprietary handle on them, and nobody else can copy them. I mean, nobody can copy Shakespeare, but certainly somebody can copy a computer chip.
That's the other thing. Yeah, I mean, these patent-grabbing thieves, Edison was a famous one. Alexander Graham Bell, by the way, the Scotsman, was also one of these fuckheads. And I was really glad when Russia, this was early, like March, April last year, the beginning of the SMO, they said piracy laws don't apply in Russia. Just download whatever the fuck you want. And I'm hoping that expands to all of these copyright patent crap stuff, because if the technology is created, anybody should benefit from it. I really hope that's the way of the future, including China, which owns most of the patents in most of the fields of technology now. Hopefully the USA will recognize, well, that's not very beneficial to us at this moment. But here your thoughts.
I was gonna say I have no problem letting a really smart guy that has invested his life into discovering something. I have no problem making him financially secure for the rest of his life thanks to whatever.
I'm not against that either.
But that doesn't happen. What happens is that idea gets stolen by a billionaire who then exploits it, and then we think that Jeff Bezos created Amazon, for instance,
or Bill Gates.
Or Tesla was creation of the Emerald Mine guy, or Bill Gates created Microsoft. Right. That's just not reality.
The Soviet mechanism was, I think, perfect. If you did a magnificent breakthrough in one of the sciences, you are the head of this faculty. You are to give this knowledge over to of course, you will live comfortably. You will live more comfortably than I think the average miner, but you are to give this.
But to not allow humanity to benefit from this, or to hold it hostage and utilize it for your political means, that's disgusting. And it is.
It's really evil. Yeah. I wanted to, if we want to pivot a little bit, because that was the last project. Let's think about these people who willed something to happen, and how did that go? Because Business Insider came out, but the data is from Swiss insurance company, UBS, like internet. You probably know UBS, massive. They came out with this World Wealth Report. So the sanctions, the price caps, the tatters. I tell you, they're stealing microchips from washing machines and dishwashers. How did that actually work out in the end? And this wealth report is stunning. Russia has grown 600 billion. It's not a lot, you know, when you consider the size of the country. A little more than half a trillion, 600 billion richer. The United States has grown 5.9 trillion impoverished compared to last year. And if you combine North America with the European continent, basically, US, Canada, and the EU, then it's $10.9 trillion lost, gone from the balance sheets. It's when you look at the balance sheets, that's what this thing is based upon. That. So how did that work out?
Russia actually gained 6 billion, and then the
600,
West lost
600 billion.
Lost trillions.
Yeah, that's the sanctions working. By the way, Michael McFaul, the all-time Russia hater, he just came out that there should be, the price cap should go from $60 to $30, and there should be more serious consequences for ship insurers and people like that who skirt the sanctions like that.
So a price cap on the price of a barrel of oil to $30, Russia,
which they never respected. Right now it's 60, and they don't respect it. People in Europe pay higher prices to Russia because Russia is not going to play a game with anybody who respects the price caps.
Yeah, no, that falls right in line with your, hey, maybe if I just will it into existence, it'll happen. It's like they're delusional. Absolutely.
There's a parallel that it keeps coming to my mind, and it's one that you're not supposed to speak of, but it seems to be, to me, the kind of hysterical divorce from reality of military logic that Hitler brought to the end of World War II. There's a real kind of that kind of panic that is and to say that these people like Victoria Nuland or John Bolton or whoever you want it, you know, or
Blinken, Sullivan,
even Blinken and you know, Jake Sullivan and all those people, they have that, they're in that context of a fascist, of the kind of framework of a fascist mind. This notion of their superiority, they cannot be countermanded by any kind of logic or any kind of apparent situation that they find themselves in. It's just what they want, and I don't know if it's my living around here with these people, and you know, and having had a retail location shop, which was a bookstore, which I faced some of that on a personal level, where there were some of these people. If you didn't do it their way, they lost it. They completely lost it.
They're used to it. It reminds me of Hillary's "It was my turn." That's what this whole thing smells like. This Ukraine desperation.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, and that hysterical laughter at the death of Gaddafi or Madeleine Albright's.
But it doesn't seem like an easy job.
Dead children are worth it.
Who wants to be in charge? Who wants to be a leader in a declining empire? Like, there's no good option. You're not gonna succeed. And who wants the job of managing this decline? It's so difficult.
There's some beautiful news that we could also equate with 1943-44 Nazi Germany, because what Zelensky is now engaged in is a massive purge of the military commissars, the people in the call-up centers where you get mobilized. He sacked all of them, and they said, if you think you've been wrong, then you should go to the front, and people who've lost a limb, who came from the front, will take your position. And apparently he was looking for someone to fill the position of defense minister, Mr. Reznikov, the guy who's been begging for F-16s with stickers and everything, that guy. And two people already turned that position down. Nobody wants to be at the head of a drowning, a dying power, basically. Two people have been earmarked for it, and they turned it down. Reznikov wants to be an ambassador to UK, so I guess he'd have a golden ticket out of there, or I don't know exactly what's in the background. But this very much reminds me of the end stages. People say this could go on for years, forever. The next year's counteroffensive, next spring, that'll be the real one. I don't know what they're smoking. I'd like some, but I thought that was
Not after a cold winter in Europe. But yeah, I wanted to say the Hindustan Times had a short piece on that there was a split in the military hierarchy between the Zelensky backers and these other people, but they weren't very clear. It almost seemed like uh, uh, they felt that Zelensky's tactics were wrong, and if they changed tactics, they could turn things around. But they weren't. There was no specifics on what that would be. I don't know.
I read some specifics, but I'm not sure if it was properly sourced or one of these reports from one of the Telegram channels. But I think someone wanted to mine the places around Kiev and Odessa, basically prepare for the Russian counteroffensive offensive. And Zelensky was hell-bent on, no, we have to tap too much forward. Take that with a grain of salt.
And the Western mainstream press always brings up the specific of, oh, you were training these people indoctrinated in the Russian and Soviet form of war as in the NATO form. And that's why, because you train them in the NATO standard, that's why they're not succeeding, because they're not familiar with the NATO standard.
The mudslinging is ongoing.
Yeah, I mean, it's everybody's pointing fingers. Nobody wants to take responsibility, but nobody wants to say, hey, we lost. Like, it's over. Let's think of something else. So yeah, it's like Titanic. It's like trying to turn the Titanic. It's slowly happening, but ultimately, it's, you know, if they don't turn it, it's gonna crash. So they gotta do something.
And that realization is spreading fast. I'm going to give you another story, but I think Carlo wanted to add something.
No. Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
There was this other thing. I thought it was remarkable. It came out, the German press covered it, but it's called the Anti-Corruption Foundation, and it's attached to the Moscow Times, which is a Dutch magazine that used to be in Russia, but it's just Dutch. It's no longer. It's in Amsterdam. By the way, these guys are also responsible for the Free Navalny campaign and the website. So, you know, the anti-Putin,
these kinds of things.
You know, yeah, okay. These guys did a research, a public opinion thing in Russia, Germany, and France. And obviously, Russia's a given. But the other two places, they asked things like, what do you think about Vladimir Putin? And both places, so that's France and Germany, the average respondent, around 20,000 per country, was he's a strong leader. And who started the war in Ukraine? And again, an overwhelming around 60% that said the USA. Of course, they framed it as, look, the Russian propaganda, we have to get rid of the Russian propaganda. But isn't that amazing that they ran this thing? They are called the most impartial Russian source, this poll, and it shocked them to find what actually public opinion among the people was.
And tell me one more time, that was the people from what country?
Well, responded? This is basically France and Germany. So they did
that's amazing. So 60% of people responded in France and Germany said the U.S. started the Ukraine war. And I mean, again, that's the reason that the billionaires invest in these think tanks, right? So I think you were describing, I forget what's called, the Center Against Corruption or something, and they always name their think tanks
Anti-Corruption Foundation, lofty name.
Freedom House, you know, they give their think tanks these most bizarre backwards names. But the purpose is to identify what public opinion is, so they know how to target their propaganda and they know how to formulate their policies. I mean, this is all as part of intelligence gathering for the ruling class, for the capitalist.
Yeah, that's why it's good. They need to have a finger on the public opinion pulse. They actually need this. That's why sometimes it's good to follow these pieces of news. And that's why I also follow Financial Times and Wall Street Journal, because that's when they think they're talking amongst themselves.
Exactly.
Can I get you a little bit more on this? Because I think this is fantastic also regarding Russia. Like, heaps of companies are now pouring back into Russia. Right. So there was Duracell, which is returning to Russia.
Right? That's crazy.
It's returning to Russia under the name Opticell. It's not going to be this little rabbit, the hare, you know, but it's going to be a little bear. That's what's going to be the mascot of Opticell. Carlsberg was shocked that Russia nationalized its little daughter company called Baltica. But sorry, that's Russia's now. Audi, Volkswagen, Skoda, they're returning to Russia. It's just amazing. I mean, the Mercedes-Benz, they disconnected dealers in Russia from their software, but not the plants. There's a plant in Germany. I think that's listed somewhere else. I'll try to find it. That has begun constructing Chinese cars, basically for the German market. I mean, Germany used to make luxury cars for the Chinese market. and just look at the swings
So
and roundabouts.
Like you pointed out, the financial press, and somebody else said this, but it's very true. I think it was our friend in South America, Central America, the other Ben. Is there another guy named Ben?
There's many,
He
unfortunately.
got a podcast. What's this? Multipolarista.
Oh, Norton.
Ben Norton, yeah.
So he was making the point that the Financial Times will often lead the way in kinds of changes, strategy changes, or what the Western oligarchy has plans long before the political press will admit it. But you can always find cutting edge information from the financial press, and so the fact that they're reporting on Volkswagen going back into Russia is telling that maybe it's a sign that they're going to be moving on to something else. Hopefully, a sane foreign policy, but maybe more China-focused foreign policy. But that all remains to be seen.
I wonder how that works. Calmly transition to a sane foreign policy. I think. For the first time, George Galloway said this, they need an actual smack on the mouth. I don't mean nuclear. They actually need to lose properly, not like in Vietnam where they can pretend we won. But that's in order for the tentacles to actually retract and take care of America, which, as you mentioned, Carlo, those videos, it's not just Pennsylvania Avenue in Philadelphia, whatever avenue in Philadelphia, but also, Los Angeles and San Francisco. They're hellish.
Oh yeah.
Not to mention the fires on Maui.
Every city here. I mean, the Rust Belt it's devastating. Yeah, and it goes back to Martin Luther King. He used to say, which country is the greatest threat to world peace? And he would say the United States.
Most of the world would agree with him.
That's a poll question, and every year, the vast majority of the world's people agree with him. I mean, what has to be more obvious? Yet you have a situation now. I think the people who talk to the Joint Chiefs have pointed out that war with China is probably
unwinnable.
A pretty stupid idea. So now they seem to be wanting to do what they did in Ukraine in the Sahel region.
I feel you might be right.
Proxy force. So it's long. I can't imagine a leader, someone with authority in that region, falling for that kind of thing when he's seen what's just happened. But then, of course, I was one of those people who's so naive to think that after the lying debacle of Iraq II, the yellow cake and the aluminum tubes and the WMD.
You thought things were going to change. There was going to be accountability.
I thought that with Iran Contra, my wife gets a laugh every time she hears the word Iran Contra uttered anywhere. She just gets this.
That was going to be a game changer where the people are going to hold them accountable and fix
that was going to be the big one. But so I'm an idiot.
Yeah, true. They keep getting away with it, but things have changed. And I will give you a positive note to end on, because Li Shangfu was in Moscow for the security conference, and then he went to Belarus, and he called both nations iron brothers. He is the defense minister of China on U.S. sanctions list since 2018. Okay, so that happened. Today is the first meeting of defense ministers of Iran and Saudi Arabia in Moscow at the Russians' behest. So that's a wonderful thing to do. Also, the foreign minister of Iran is in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, the first time in 30 years. So there is another aspect to this. People, they're trying to make deals with Iran, with Saudi Arabia. I already have a feeling they're going to say thanks, but no thanks. So there are alternatives now.
So you think that this notion that Kiev is growing closer to Saudi Arabia is just bullshit?
Absolute bullshit. That was they're trying to use it for very twisted PR that just doesn't work.
Last week sometime there was a big push by the US to win back Saudi Arabia. And now we're seeing this fall. This is like the counter move. So we're going to see how it plays out, but I'm optimistic. I think Saudi Arabia is done with the West. They've moved on. They're expanding their options. They're not putting all their eggs in the U.S. basket like they had done for decades. But it's no longer working for them, and so I think that's changing. As far as Carlo, go ahead.
Just look at the offers these people have been given. I can give you a paraphrased list, okay? The US said, Saudi Arabia, please only price your oil in dollars. Okay, that's what we want. We'll give you recognition maybe of Palestine, but you also have to say no to Huawei technology. You have to say no to foreign, especially Chinese bases. When the money comes around 80% from China, the biggest buyer of Saudi oil. Okay, so they said we're in discussions for 4 to 6 months. The Saudis will talk to them patiently. They're going to say no.
And
what Iran got?
They have to recognize Israel.
No, recognize Palestine is what they would recognize Israel in exchange, which they haven't done in their history. You're right. You're right. That would be on their part. They would do that. Yeah. And then they said, Iran, you really have to stop supplying drones to Russia. And that to me, I think, was even more amazing, because what they promised was not to impose any new sanctions except for human rights, you know those. And then we will not enforce the oil sanctions so strictly if you do this for us. And I don't think they were aware that there's a plant in Russia, Iranian Russian plant that is ready to make drones, about 80% completion. So again, they got there a little bit too late. I mean, Iran is a technical country, the most cited in scientific papers in the Arab world, and they think that they're going to take a deal like this. Would you? You know, I think it's
the U.S. scrambling and trying to come up with some agreement to salvage any sort of success, and it's too late on both fronts. Way too late on the Iranian front, but also. I mean, everybody's going to move on without the U.S. I think, I wanted to mention that Carlo.
Way too late for Kiev. Yep.
Yeah. Why would the U.S. think that doing what they just lost in Ukraine would be a good idea to do in Africa? Well, I think that the cynic in me thinks that they're ruthless, and rather than give China a win, they're happy to just see hundreds of thousands of people murdered, and a war and chaos, and open air slave markets like return to Libya. Libya was the most prosperous country in all of Africa, and because we felt threatened by what Libya was going to do about unifying Africa, getting off the US dollar, etc., we destroyed
keeping their resources.
We are happy to destroy so other people don't benefit. If it doesn't help us, we will just destroy it. So they're more than happy to destroy, what China would like to do in Africa with the Belt and Road Initiative. Again, that's the struggle China's up against. They don't have to outcompete the U.S. They got to keep the U.S. from being able to just destroy and ruin all the lives of everyone in Africa, because that's what the U.S. will happily do. They wouldn't think twice about it.
This might be negative, but they actually have to think properly about anti-terrorism, because first I thought this was a report or a blog post, but it came out in RIA Novosti. It's not in the cheat sheet, but the MI6, the British intelligence, have apparently asked Ukraine to assemble around 100 veteran Azovite fuckheads to go to cause trouble in Africa, basically to stop cooperation between African nations and Russia. So that's if we can't have Africa, we're going to have revenge and we're going to have chaos. That's exactly what they're up against, and they have to prepare.
But my concern is the leaders in Africa themselves, the Tinubus.
Well, we know which ones are bought and paid for. The people that sign on to it.
I mean, the Bazooms. I mean, what is going on in their heads?
Our friend from Nigeria come back, and he can answer for his.
Yeah, true. What's going on in their heads is everything is as it was 30 years ago. For 1.5 years, they only read the Western press, so they know Ukraine is winning, Russia's about to collapse. I think they're still in that world, and that's the only way you can still obey the US. And that bubble is about to burst. That's what I think. Coming
One
weeks,
can only
maybe
hope.
months. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe on that note, because we got a little notice from MUTIU, we can say goodbye and say thank you to everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer. This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you.
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted, and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York PARROT, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations.